Maybe you're new to Apex, or maybe Season 10's just been really bad for you. Well, either way, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get your first win in Season 10 right now. Now, this is a guide for absolute beginners going through every little decision that you need to make throughout your game to win. What legends to use, what guns to use, the best strategy for your first win, and finally, the best drop spots to use this strategy. So the first thing I want to talk about is what legend should you use. Now, the first legend I want to talk about is Bloodhound. Bloodhound is a great start for beginners because he has very basic abilities that aren't very hard to use but are very effective. If you don't already know, Bloodhound's abilities are his tactical, which is where he can scan his field of view for enemies and highlight them through walls. His ultimate is where he can highlight all of his enemies red like thermal vision, and he starts to move faster, so it's very useful in a fight, especially fights with Bangalore and Caustic where you can't see, because it lets you see through the smoke. And his passive ability is basically where he can see like tracks of where people have been before him, and it'll tell him how many seconds ago they were there. Now the second legend I recommend you start with is Lifeline. Very good for beginner. Lifeline's tactical ability is her Dock Heal Drone, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a drone that is stationary that if you get close enough to it, it'll heal you. Her ultimate is a care package that you can call in wherever you want that has some pretty good loot in it. And finally, her passive ability is that she can combat heal, which means that she can deploy her Dock Drone instead of directly reviving somebody so that she can fight while Dock Drone heals her teammates. Now, the second thing we need to talk about is what guns to use this season. Now, for beginners, we're looking for guns that are automatic, so they have chances to miss shots if they need to, and that have very low recoil, so that they can control it easily. So, the first gun that I would recommend is the Rampage. It is definitely in the meta right now. The Rampage is an automatic LMG with pretty low recoil and pretty slow fire rate, so it's great for your medium to long range fights. Another good gun that's been in the meta for seasons and seasons is the R301. The R301 is probably one of the best guns in the game because it has decent range, low recoil, high fire rate, and it is just great for almost every fight. Two other good guns that I recommend for beginners are the Volt SMG and the Flatline AR. I recommend these basically for the same reasons. They're just great all-around guns. Now what I recommend doing for your loadout is using the Rampage for one of your guns for medium to longer range fights, and then for your second gun using the R301 or the Volt or the Flatline. This way you have most fights covered because you have medium and long range weapon, and then you have closer range weapons. But don't just take my word for it. Just go into the firing range before you do anything else and try out all of the guns and see which ones you are good with. And while you're there, try out all of the sights to see which ones you like the most. I think a big mistake that a lot of beginners make is going on YouTube and watching YouTube videos of people playing Apex and trying to copy the sights and the guns that they're using instead of actually playing with the guns that you're good with. Are you liking this video? Are you getting some good tips? Well, if you are, make sure to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and comment with any tips that you might have for other beginners. Anyway, so now that we have our legends figured out and our guns figured out, the third thing we need to talk about is our strategy. Having the right legend and the right gun is a great thing, but it's not going to mean for much if you're not using the right strategy. Now, the first strategy that I recommend for absolute beginners to get their first win is going to be to stay back, loot up, and kind of just let the game ride out as much as you can. Now, what I mean by this is to land somewhere that not a lot of people go to that will have decent loot, and I'll talk about a couple of those places here in a minute. And basically just avoid fights as much as you can. Just only fight when you have to, which is basically just the last one or two fights. Now, a big disclaimer with this strategy is that it is not going to be a good strategy in the long run. You might get your first win with it, but in the end, to get better, you're gonna have to start taking fights. But I figured that the reason you clicked on this video is because you just wanted to see the words "You are the champion" pop up on your screen, no matter how you got it. So the final thing we need to talk about is drop spots. As I said earlier, you're going to want to drop in places that's going to have few to no other people dropping on them, that's going to have pretty good loot. Now, for World's Edge, I recommend you land in a place called Geyser. This place has a lot of buildings and a lot of good loot, and not too many people go here. Every once in a while another squad will go there, but not often. You can also drop in a spot called the Tree for a lot of the same reasons. Just keep in mind that whenever you're choosing a drop spot, you're going to want to pay attention to the path of the dropship, because if the place that you choose to go to is too close to the path of the ship, there's probably going to be people on it. For Olympus, I recommend you land either on Elysium, which is right here, or in this no-name spot, which is right here. These spots have decent loot and little to no action, which is going to be great for you beginners. Now for Kings Canyon, I actually already made another video on where to drop, so make sure to check that out. That'll be in the top right corner right here. But now, the rest is up to you. You got to get out there, you got to put in the reps, you got to get into fights or avoid them, and get your first win.